The bell above the diner's door jingled, sharp against the quiet lull of the night. Chloe Saunders looked up instinctively, wiping her hands on a towel that had seen too many shifts. It was nearly 2 a.m., and Rosie's diner was winding down. Only a few regulars lingered, an old man nursing his 5th cup of black coffee, a woman tapping furiously on her laptop, and a young couple arguing softly in the corner booth. She didn't expect him. He walked in like he didn't belong to the Yao, whirled outside like the air shifted to make space for him, tall, commanding, sharply dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Chloe made in a month. Richard Harris. Yes, that Richard Harris. The tech billionaire, the genius CEO behind Harris Tech, the kind of man who bought companies over coffee and never looked back. He didn't glance at anyone as he sat in the booth by the window like he always did, alone. Chloe let out a breath and picked up the coffee pot. She approached his table, every step measured. She'd served him. Before, he never remembered, that was fine. She wasn't looking for his attention, but tonight felt different. "Coffee?" she asked quietly. Richard glanced up, barely registering her face. "Sure. Why not?" he said, voice flat, eyes already back on his phone. Typical. She poured the coffee, then turned to leave, but he spoke again. "You're still here, huh?" His tone wasn't curious, it was amused. Chloe froze. She turned halfway back toward him. "Excuse me?" "This place," he said, motioning around the diner like it was a joke. "You ever think about doing more with your life? Or is this your big dream, refilling mugs at 2 a.m.? A flush crept into Chloe's cheeks. She knew he didn't mean it kindly. People like him never did. "I do what I have to do," she said evenly, keeping her voice calm. He smirked, leaning back. "You're young, smart-looking. What happened? Couldn't hack it in the real world?" There it was. Chloe met his gaze. "Not everyone gets the same starting line, Mr. Harris," he chuckled. "Oh, here we go, the whole life is unfair routine. You think I got where I am because someone handed it to me?" "You tell me," she replied. He stared at her now. Really looked. "If you're so smart, then explain it," he said, voice low and taunting. "Explain why you're here pouring coffee for people like me." The diner fell quiet. Even the college girl stopped typing. Chloe stood still, coffee pot trembling slightly in her hand. "You really want to know?" she said, eyes locked on his. Richard shrugged. "Why not? Enlighten me." She set the pot down on the table carefully. "I had a full scholarship to one of the top universities, majored in applied mathematics and behavioral economics, graduated with honors, had job offers, real ones. But then my mom got sick. Cancer. Aggressive. I was 22. I walked away from everything to take care of her. She didn't have insurance. Every bill, every treatment, I paid it, sold my car, took 3 jobs. This one stuck." He blinked. No smug smile this time. "I've been here ever since," Chloe continued, her voice quiet but sure. "Doesn't make me less smart. Just means my priorities look different than yours." Richard shifted in his seat. For once, he had nothing clever to say. "I may be wearing a name tag and an apron," she added, "but I still read research papers during my breaks. I still think about algorithms while I mop this floor. And I still remember who I am. Do you?" His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Someone in the back clapped, just once. The woman with the laptop. Then the college girl joined in, and the sound grew, soft but undeniable. Chloe picked up the coffee pot, turned and walked away. Richard sat alone in the booth by the window, staring into his cup. Suddenly it didn't taste the same, and for the first time in a long while he wasn't sure if he was the smartest person in the room anymore. The next night Chloe almost didn't show up for her shift. She'd replayed the scene in her head 12 times. Richard Harris's smug smirk dissolving into silence, the quiet applause that followed, and the way her heart thudded not with fear, but with something dangerously close to pride. She hadn't planned to say any of that, but it had needed to be said, and the billionaire hadn't returned a word. Yet as the neon lights of Rosie's flickered back to life and the familiar scent of fryer oil clung to the air, Chloe found herself behind the counter once again, apron tied, hair up, and chest just a little lighter than before. Then, at 2:07 a.m., the bell jingled. Richard Harris walked in. Again, Chloe's breath caught. He wasn't wearing a suit this time, just a plain black shirt, sleeves rolled, and no phone in his hand. He looked different, not just in clothes, but in energy. Less armor, more man. He sat at the same booth. She considered ignoring him. But then curiosity, stubborn and sharp, nudged her forward. "Coffee?" she asked, tone neutral. He looked up at her with something closer to respect than mockery. "Please," she poured without speaking. He hesitated. "You know, I've been thinking about what you said." "Which part?" she replied, not looking at him. "All of it," he said. "About starting lines, about choices." Chloe raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "I started my first company at 19, he continued, stirring sugar into his coffee. Dropped out of college, slept in my car for 6 months. Everyone thinks I had it easy because I made it big, but they don't see the years I spent being laughed at." Chloe glanced at him. "Difference is they're not laughing now." He nodded. "But I forgot something along the way. How to listen." She folded her arms, skeptical. "And now you're here to listen?" He leaned forward. "I came back because I want to offer you a job." The diner noise seemed to fade. Chloe blinked. "A job?" she repeated slowly. "Doing what? Serving coffee at your board meetings?" "No," he said, a faint smile forming. "Consulting, strategy division. I'm starting a new team. I need someone who sees patterns, reads behavior. Someone who can challenge me without fearing me." She laughed softly. "You're serious." "I am," he said. Chloe leaned on the edge of the booth. "And you think hiring the waitress who embarrassed you is a good business decision?" "I think not hiring you would be a worse one," he replied. "You said you used to study behavioral economics, right? I'm building a consumer prediction model, real-time analytics. It's not just code. It's about understanding people. You've spent the last 6 years doing that." Chloe hesitated. Her hands felt cold. The offer wasn't just tempting, it was terrifying. "You don't know anything about me," she said. "I know you don't flinch in front of power. I know you still think deeply, even when life's ugly. And I know you made me think for the first time in a long time." Silence stretched between them. Then Chloe did something unexpected. She sat down across from him. "I'm not going to say yes," she said slowly. "But I'm also not going to say no." Richard smiled. "I'll be back tomorrow," he said, "with a proposal, not just words." Chloe gave a half nod, half smile. And for the first time, she didn't feel like a background character in someone else's story. She felt like the story itself was finally beginning. Chloe hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, fragments of Richard's offer looped through her mind. Consulting, strategy, a team that didn't even exist yet. It all felt like a dream you didn't dare speak aloud, afraid it might vanish. Why would a billionaire who once mocked her for pouring coffee now want her on his team? But as the morning sun spilled through the kitchen blinds, she found herself staring at an unopened envelope on her nightstand. It was from Boston Tech Institute, her acceptance letter from years ago. The one she had never framed, never celebrated because life had rerouted her before she could even begin. That night, she walked into Rosie's with her shoulders just a little straighter. She had no idea what she was walking into. But this time, she wouldn't walk away from it. At 2:04 a.m., the bell jingled. Richard was back. He wasn't alone. Another man followed, a younger guy, carrying a sleek leather portfolio and looking incredibly out of place among the chipped tiles and laminated menus. Chloe raised an eyebrow. Richard noticed. "This is Jay," he said, sliding into the booth. "My lead developer." Jay offered an awkward nod. "Big fan of your pies," he mumbled. Chloe smirked and poured coffee into 2 mugs. "So," she said, You said you'd bring a proposal, not just words. Richard reached into his coat and pulled out a tablet. He turned the screen toward her. On it was a presentation titled, Project Iris Predictive Consumer Behavior Platform. I want to build something that understands people's choices before they make them, he said. Not based on data alone, but behavior, environment, tone, body language. You see it every day. You read people faster than most of my analysts. Chloe stared at the screen, then at him. This is real. It is, Richard said. And I want your mind on it. Jay leaned forward. We already built the early prototype, but it's too clinical. Numbers in a vacuum. We need empathy. We need someone who sees patterns in real life. Richard says that's you. Chloe swallowed hard. She had ideas, too many. Ideas that had no place behind a counter. But now? I can't just walk away from my life, she said cautiously. I have bills, a sick mother. No guarantee this won't disappear overnight. Richard didn't flinch. That's why I'm offering a contract, 6 months, salary up front, flexible hours. You can still work here if you want. I don't want to pull you away from your life. I want to build something with it. Chloe looked at the tablet again. Numbers, charts, models, and yet, beneath it all, something that felt deeply personal. What if I fail? She whispered. Richard looked her dead in the eye. Then you fail trying to change something. But I don't think you will. Chloe looked around the diner, the flickering light above the pie display, the creaky floor, the calendar from 2019 still hanging behind the counter. She looked back at the screen. I want 3 days, she said. Take 5, Richard replied. But I'll be here tomorrow, coffee or no coffee. As he stood up and left, something inside her stirred. Not fear, not doubt, but the quiet throb of a long-buried fire beginning to glow again. This wasn't just about a job. It was about remembering the woman she was before life demanded her silence. And now, maybe, just maybe, it was time to let her speak. On the third night, Chloe didn't wait for the bell to ring. She stood at the window of Rosie's, arms crossed, eyes locked on the parking lot. Her shift hadn't even started, but her heart was already racing. It wasn't nerves. It was that restless energy you feel when your life is about to turn a corner and you're still deciding whether to turn with it. She had spent the last 2 days buried in research, digging into behavioral economic theories. She once knew by heart, reading the flaws in current consumer models, sketching diagrams on napkins at 3 a.m. like she used to in college. She had been exhausted but more alive than she'd felt in years. And now Richard was late. Typical. When the door finally creaked open, it wasn't Richard. It was Jay. He looked rushed, hair windblown, tie loosened. He sent me ahead. Jay said, catching his breath. He got pulled into an investor call, but he wanted you to see this. He placed a manila folder on the counter. Chloe opened it slowly. Inside were sketches. Her sketches. Not literally hers, but close. User journey, flows, decision trees, mock-ups that mirrored the exact things she'd been thinking, but they were built on her logic, her voice, integrated into something real. She looked up, stunned. He used what I said? Jay smiled. Every word. He stayed up all night with the engineers, said he hasn't worked like that in years. Kind. Have scared us, honestly. Chloe laughed softly despite herself. And he wants to know your decision, Jay added. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached behind the counter, grabbed her journal from under the register, and slid it across the table. Give this to him. Jay frowned. What is it? It's my proposal. Notes, improvements to the logic map, emotional variable weightings, feedback loops. Also, she smirked, a better name than Project Iris. Jay opened the first page and blinked. Wow. Chloe looked at him seriously. If I'm doing this, I'm not doing it halfway. He said he wanted someone who thinks differently. That's exactly what he'll get. Jay nodded, tucking the journal under his arm. I think he already knows. She exhaled, feeling both lighter and heavier at once. As Jay left, Chloe returned to her usual rhythm, clearing tables, refilling coffee, exchanging tired smiles with regulars. But something in her movements had changed, like her limbs were remembering what it felt like to belong to something bigger than survival. Then, just after 3 a.m., the door jingled again. Richard. He looked tired, but not the kind of tired that dragged a person down. The kind that comes from fighting for something. He walked up to the counter without a word. Chloe poured his coffee without asking. "I got it," he said, lifting the journal. "All of it. Read it 3 times. "And?" she asked. He met her eyes. "It's brilliant. You're brilliant." She didn't flinch. "I know." He smiled. Not the arrogant smirk she remembered, but something softer. "You're in, right?" Chloe hesitated, then nodded. "I'm in, but on my terms." Richard raised an eyebrow. "Let's hear them." "No boardroom politics, no filtering my voice. If I disagree, you'll hear it." "Agreed. I'm not leaving Rosie's yet. I need time. You'll have it. And I want a credit. Public. I want the world to know I helped build this." Richard held out his hand. "Deal." She shook it. Firmly. Finally. The deal was sealed not just in words but in mutual respect. Something she never thought she'd find in a man who once mocked her from a booth by the window. As the sky outside shifted from deep navy to pale blue, Chloe realized something even more powerful than being offered a second chance was choosing. And for the first time in years, she wasn't just surviving, she was building again. The headline hit the news before Chloe even stepped out of bed. Tech giant Harris Tech unveils secret project, and the mastermind behind it is a diner waitress? She stared at her cracked phone screen, mouth parted, pulse racing. Her name was everywhere. Interviews requested, LinkedIn blowing up, emails from professors she hadn't heard from in years. But the most jarring part? They didn't call her a waitress. They called her a strategist. 3 weeks had passed since she shook Richard's hand at Rosie's. Since then, everything had moved faster than she imagined. Team meetings in sleek downtown offices, prototypes. On touchscreens, her ideas reshaped and deployed in real time. She wasn't the assistant to the vision. She was the source of it, but attention came with a cost. The spotlight wasn't warm. It was scorching. People started showing up at the diner, not for pancakes, but for selfies. Chloe's co-workers whispered about her behind napkin holders. Even her manager, who once called her kid, now avoided eye contact. Everyone had a different version of her story, except the real one. And then came the meeting. Richard called her into the executive boardroom. It wasn't just any meeting, it was the meeting. Investors, directors, major media. Chloe stood at the head of the table in a gray blazer she bought from a thrift store just that morning, gripping a flash drive like it was a lifeline. Across from her sat men and women in $5,000 suits, eyes scanning her like she didn't belong. She cleared her throat and clicked the remote. Slides appeared. Her models, her language, her logic. "I know what you're thinking," she said. "A waitress from a corner diner doesn't belong here. But let me ask you, how much do your team spend trying to understand what real people want? You build systems from data points. I build them from conversations." Silence. 6 years in a diner taught me more about behavior than any textbook ever did. I've seen decisions made from fear, from love, from grief. You think customers are rational, they're not. And that's where your numbers fail. One of the executives leaned forward. "And what makes you think you can scale intuition?" Chloe didn't blink. "Because intuition, when structured, is data. You just haven't been collecting it right." Richard sat back, arms crossed, smiling quietly. She finished the pitch, and when the lights came back on, there wasn't immediate applause, but there also wasn't a single challenge. By the end of the hour, they were asking her questions, taking her notes. After the meeting, she walked out onto the balcony. The city buzzed beneath her, cars like veins in a living machine. For a moment, she felt like she was standing in a life that once belonged to someone else. Richard joined her a minute later. "You know," he said, I've watched 100 people pitch in that room. None of them quieted it like you did. She exhaled, wind brushing her hair. I'm not trying to quiet rooms. I'm trying to change them. Richard looked at her, long and thoughtful. You already have. She turned to him. It's still not real sometimes. Like any second I'll wake up with a tray in my hands and eggs burning on table 4. You won't, he said. But even if you did, you'd still be the woman who rewired the way we think. For the first time she smiled, not politely, but freely, because this wasn't just a moment. It was a shift. And she hadn't been handed it. She had earned it. The invitation arrived in a velvet envelope. Chloe almost tossed it, thinking it was another event trying to cash in on the viral story of the waitress who changed tech. But when she opened it, her hand stilled. Keynote speaker, International Innovation Summit, Geneva, Switzerland. Below that, in gold embossed type, we don't want a CEO. We want a voice that started from the ground. She sat on the edge of her bed, the envelope trembling in her hands. From behind a counter in a midnight diner to a global stage, she hadn't planned this. She didn't even dare dream it. But maybe that's why it was happening. When she called Richard, his response was simple. You're the future, Chloe. The rest of us are just trying to keep up. The flight to Switzerland was surreal. Her first passport stamp. Her first time seeing snow-capped mountains not from a screen. But nothing compared to the moment she stood backstage at the summit, microphone clipped to her collar, looking out at a sea of international leaders. Her fingers were cold, but her voice steady. And then, her name echoed through the auditorium. Chloe Saunders. She walked onto the stage wearing the same blazer from the thrift store, not because she couldn't afford another, but because it reminded her of where she came from. The room hushed. I was once told I was just a waitress, she began. That pouring coffee and cleaning tables didn't require a mind. But I want to tell you something. Brilliance doesn't always wear a suit or sit in a corner office. Sometimes it stands behind a counter and learns more about human behavior than a spreadsheet ever could. She told her story, not polished, not perfect, but real, about her mom. The night she cried behind the kitchen, the forgotten dreams, and the man who once mocked her, but later offered her a seat at the table, and how she didn't just take the seat, she built a new table entirely. By the time she finished, the room was silent again. Then a standing ovation, not just clapping, cheering. Cameras flashed, reporters surged, and somewhere in the back Richard stood with his arms crossed, eyes glinting with quiet pride. Later that evening, she found a moment alone in the hotel garden. Snowflakes drifted down, catching in her hair. The wind bit at her cheeks, but her heart was warm, because deep down she knew something far bigger had happened than just a tech innovation. She had proven something the world too often forgot, that potential doesn't come with a title, or a salary or a degree. It comes with perseverance. And sometimes the one who's been overlooked the longest is the one who ends up changing everything. She didn't need to explain herself anymore. Because now, the world was listening. The end.